Electoral performance in Russia. The Kremlin cannot save Russian borders, and aid to Ukraine from partners is expanding. Hello, this is Favor Stenemak speaking from Kyiv, Ukraine, UATV English studio in a weekly attempt to bring the hardest truths in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Putin's elections are ending in Russia. Not a president, but a usurper and a dictator. In a so-called democratic Russia, Putin has already been in power for 24 years. This year, the Russian authorities fought for turnout with all their might. Even the Russian opposition came to their hand. They arrived at the stations, and there was already a larger turnout. And the results will be as desired. High voter turnout would help the Kremlin lend a semblance of legitimacy to Putin's continued rule. The high turnout is also used to justify the Russian military invasion of Ukraine. Experts from Foundation Public Opinion, Russian Public Opinion Research Center, and Institute of Social Marketing in the previous week calculated voting results. Putin of the Russian Federation has the highest rating. He must get up to 82% of the votes. The other candidates will get nearly 6% of the votes. At the same time, preparing for a concert celebrating Putin's election victory began on Tuesday.
I don't think that all people in Russia support Putin. Just now, it's such a totalitarian regime, especially after February of 2022. It's starting to look like Stalin's regime. And I think, as we saw it in the past, after the so-called elections, Putin will become even tougher about his people, because he is afraid of his people.
Moscow has launched a large-scale campaign to force the population of the occupied territories of Ukraine to take part in the presidential elections of the Russian Federation. Collaborating with the Russian authorities, they were walking with ballot boxes from house to house, looking for voters, accompanied by armed soldiers. Ukrainians living in the occupied territories are also being forced to vote by the special project supposedly designed to inform them about the voting procedure and about all the candidates. But in fact, this project involves home visits to all residents remaining in Russian-occupied territories. They collect personal information and sometimes film local residents during these visits. If they found any man, they conscript him to the Russian army to use in the meat assaults. And if there are some residents who didn't want to take Russian passport, security service is visiting them for their own purposes. For example, torturing. There is already significant pressure on Ukrainians to obtain Russian passports, but Ukrainian passports are still accepted as identification to facilitate voting. Before the elections, Ukrainian partisans in the occupied territories warned that Russians are planning terrorist attacks and provocations with victims among the civilian population at polling stations in the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. And of course, they want to accuse the armed forces of Ukraine. And all these are obvious evidence of Kremlin crimes. Over the past week, the discussion on the topic, what if the elections in the Russian Federation are not recognized, became popular, as Moscow doesn't control our territories at all, but our foreign partners can express something significant, condemn, etc., if they want. Regarding their non-recognition of elections in the Russian Federation as a whole, the question arises, what are the consequences? At least since the 2018 elections, the West has had comprehensive information about the scale of voter fraud in Russia. There was a network of observers in the Russian Federation, including using AI. They proved the total nature of falsifications. Already during Putin's elections in 2018, in dozens of regions of the Russian Federation, it was impossible to establish the voting results, and this was recorded in video. That is, for at least 6 years now, there has been an illegitimate president in Russia. And from 2021, there is a completely fake Duma. According to all the canons of civilized countries, Putin should be called nothing more than de facto head of the Russian Federation, the de facto government of the Russian Federation. In this regard, the fake elections of 2024 are not fundamentally different from the fake ones since at least 2018. So there are lone formal grounds for actions against Russia. There are grounds for a large-scale transfer of weapons to Ukraine, for our troops to arrest Putin and his accomplices, for sanctions, confiscations, etc. Everything is already there. There are just no decisions in our partner countries. At first, there were reservations that Putin should not lead, but in general, the Western partners shy away from the issue of regime change in the Russian Federation. Although the best way to condemn the falsification of elections, honor the memory of Navalny and help Putin's opponents is to confiscate Russian assets and transfer them to Ukraine, ban Russian oil as much as possible, and cut off the Russian Federation from access to modern equipment. As a result, Putin will disappear over time. More loud words will do nothing. But if someone considers it important to demonstrate their rejection of the results of the voting in the Russian Federation, we can use the words de facto power. As long as Putin's orders are carried out, he is the power. There is no need to create illusions. The goal is to stop carrying orders. Emmanuel Macron continues to actively engage in the agenda of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Last week, the French president discussed with the leaders of the parliamentary parties the deployment of French troops to Ukraine. And this week, he said that politicians must not let Russia win.
We will never lead an offensive. We will never take the initiative. France is force for peace. Simply today, to have peace in Ukraine, we must not be weak, and therefore we must lucidly look at the situation, and we must with determination, will, courage, say that we are ready to use the means to achieve our goals, which is for Russia not to win.
And on Friday, French President Emmanuel Macron met in Berlin with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk for developing a common position of European countries on military assistance to Ukraine in the fight against Russian aggression. And this is understandable because if Russian forces win, security in Europe will be reduced to zero. And Russia has a chance because in recent months, the Ukrainian military has been facing a catastrophic shortage of weapons. After a $60 billion military aid package for Ukraine was frozen in the US Senate, Europe should think how to help Ukraine. And Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that Poland, Germany and France must act together, mobilizing the help to Ukraine and the whole of Europe. What does true solidarity with Ukraine look like? Less words, more weapons, he wrote on social media on Friday. Disagreements between Paris and Berlin have intensified in recent weeks after the German Chancellor said that German troops would have to be sent to Ukraine to look after long-range Taurus missiles. Ahead of Friday's meeting of 3 European leaders, Scholz spoke by phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that the meeting would be of great importance in providing Ukraine with all possible assistance. Zelensky, in turn, told the German Chancellor that the Ukrainian armed forces' priority areas of support are now armored vehicles, artillery and air defense. On Thursday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also expressed his concern about the lack of weapons among Ukrainians. According to him, more than 2 years after the start of a full-scale Russian invasion, Ukrainians are not running out of courage, but they are running out of ammunition.
The fact that the Russians are able to outgun the Ukrainians every day, of course, is a huge challenge. It's one of the reasons why the Russians have been able to make some advances on the battlefield over the last weeks and months, and therefore it is an urgent need for allies to make the decisions necessary to step up, provide more ammunition to Ukraine. Of course, we have the capacity, we have the economies to be able to provide Ukraine with what they need. This is a question of political will to take the decisions and to prioritize support for Ukraine.
And that's why the Czech initiative to buy 800,000 ammunition is very in time. The president of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, said that Ukraine's allies have already collected all the necessary funds for the purchase of artillery ammunition for the Ukrainian army. According to him, 18 countries participated in a procurement program, and the ammunition will arrive in Ukraine in the coming weeks. Ammunition may enter Ukraine as early as June. This was stated by Tomas Pojar, advisor to the Czech Prime Minister on national security. Euractiv reports. Well, let's hope it will be faster. For the near future, we are hoping for an aid package from the US, which was announced this week. The Freedom of Russia Legion, the Siberian Battalion and the Russian Volunteer Corps also decided to take part in the elections and launched a new operation on the territory of Russia this week. They entered the border village of Tyotkino in the Kursk region. Also, a Russian Volunteer Corps conducts a raid in the Belgorod region. The Siberian Battalion showed a video of a land-in battle on the territory of the Russian Federation and reported the destruction of a position of the Putin's army. According to deep state data, they were able to occupy more than 40 square kilometers of Russian territory. The Legion Freedom of Russia announced that it had taken control of part of the village of Tyotkino. Literally in the first hours, they managed to destroy the communication point and the command post there. shooting battles continue in Tyotkina and in surroundings since Wednesday. As a result of drone strikes and mortar attacks, the Russian army lost several units of armored vehicles, 2 mortars and 2 D-30 howitzers. At least 10 Russian soldiers were injured. It is reported that 2 warehouses with ammunition were destroyed. Belgorod and its surroundings are also restless. Local residents report about shelling. It is known about battles with the participation of armored vehicles and anti-aircraft guns in surrounding areas. The participants of the raids warn of mass attacks on Russian troops in Belgorod and Kursk regions and call for the evacuation of civilians. In response, security forces surrounded the railway stations in Belgorod to prevent evacuation.
With the intensification of hostilities on the territory of Russia, the Legion Freedom of Russia, the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Siberian Battalion calls on residents of the Belgorod and Kursk region to remain in shelters. The best solution these days would be to leave the territories of the Belgorod and Kursk regions until the end of the active phase of the limited military operation. Statement of the Russian freedom fighters.
Why this is important? This is an attempt to distract part of the forces of the Russian army from being transferred to the territory of Ukraine. The military information operation will help to destroy the illusion of a stable Russia, which Russian top officials tried to create before the elections. And now time for more on UATV English. You ask questions, we answer it in easy terms. The question of this week has been voiced by our viewer, user, and many symbols after that. And that question sounded like, was it not Ukraine attacking the very same borderlands in the last week? Thank you for the question, and I will immediately answer. No, not Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine currently have more important goals: deterring Russian assaults near Avdiivka in the southern direction, maintaining a bridgehead on the left bank of the Dnipro River. By the way, our soldiers have been holding positions there for 4 months already. If you remember, during Putin's big press conference, he said that Russians suffered sanitary losses near Krynik and all Ukrainians were pushed beyond the river. But in fact, it is the opposite. The Russians cannot gain a foothold there, and our heroes are holding their ground. And this is despite the fact that now some units are experiencing a total lack of ammunition. And what is happening now on the territory of Russia near the Ukrainian border is an internal matter of Russians. As we can see, not all of them support Putin and his 24-year rule. Or maybe they supported and wanted to vote in the elections so badly that they had to fight for their right in military skirmishes. And in fact, that the goals of the Russian freedom fighters coincide with the Ukrainian ones is a pleasant coincidence. Although in truth such goals should be set for themselves by all world politicians, as Macron, Tusk and the leaders of the Baltic states are doing it now. By the way, the Ukrainian intelligence service intercepted a lot of conversations of civilians from the border regions who are trying to go deep into the country. Therefore, it is very restless there right now, no matter what Kremlin propagandists say. That seems to be it for tonight and for the week. It was Pavlo Shtermach in UATV English breaking the hard truths in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine as usual. We like you and we hope the feeling is at least somewhat mutual. Like us in return, subscribe and share. Help us to promote Ukrainian voice worldwide. Stay safe and tuned for more right already on tomorrow.